In a world filled with sharks, bears, and killer bees, one man is brave enough to stay indoors to bring you the latest in gaming, movie, and pop culture news. That man is Tom Awesome, and this is the Outside is Overrated podcast.
Hello and welcome to Outside is Overrated Game Club. Today we're wrapping up our discussion on Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes by Rabbit and Bear Studios, published by 505 Games. I'm your outstandingly well-prepared host, Tom Sidlogic, and joining me for the discussion today are regular co-hosts, the Hobby Box Joe Burns.
Heyo.
And our good friend John Munch.
Howdy, howdy.
Also joining us is OiO Patreon supporter Mike Mathwig.
Gentlemen.
In this monthly segment, we play a game with our community and invite our Patreon supporters to join the discussion. If you want to join in, support Outside is Overrated on Patreon at patreon.com/OIO. You can help support the show for as little as $2 a month. First, we're going to set expectations for what we're going to talk about. This is our part 2 discussion. This is our wrap-up discussion. This will be our spoiler discussion of Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes. I feel like having another month with the game. We barely scratched the surface last month. I can't wait to get Mike's insight having finished the game now that he can talk about a lot more. So there will be spoilers in this, primarily in the story section, and I'll give another spoiler alert when we're really getting into that. We're also going to talk about the battle system, base building, minigames and side pursuits, the story, and specific characters. In Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes, in typical JRPG fashion, you're controlling a party of characters making turn-based decisions on how to attack. John, did the battle system grow on you from our first session?
It got better, right? I got into more of the boss battles. I think the boss battles is really where it shines, right? Which, I mean, really with turn-based RPGs, I think that's kind of par for the course, right? And they have a cool gimmick system that I actually really like. Where I don't really talked about it too much last time. Where every time you have a different boss battle, there's usually they straight up call it a gimmick, and that's a really fun thing that they tie into. Where you're stopping a hammer from swinging, or you're stopping like these big set piece items from happening. So I think that was cool.
John, let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there. Do you generally like gimmicks in different boss fights?
Well done, yes. If they're well done. If it is, very, very like light blinking on guy's nose and I gotta punch the light blinking on guy's nose, not so much, right? But if it fits into the theme of the boss itself, it can be extremely enjoyable. Right? I mean, you got like an Ultros type deal where like, hey, you know what? He's going to disappear and then come back and you shoot fire at him because he's an octopus. Those are fun kind of gimmickies. Or if it's, I think of like Octopath Traveler 2 where you're fighting the train. Like there's some cool things they do gimmicky in that. And this just kind of took it to another level where like, we're just going to straight up say, this is the gimmick, right? Do you want to take your turn and try and do the gimmick? And a lot of them, they kind of played fast and loose with like, oh, there's going to be a little bit of like turn order management to see if you actually get to do it right and make sure your guy hits the gimmick or does the bad guy hit the gimmick. So, and again, they're all themed very well. So they're fun to me in this game.
Yeah, I think in the boss fights, they were really cool and added a little bit of a layer of atmosphere to them. There's one specifically where it's like, we've got this huge tank behind us, and we're fighting these monsters. How can we not use the tank? And then finally it's like, oh, we could use the tank. So that was one where it was like, okay, it makes sense that we have this here now. I would say in the normal battles, though, because how it pops up in normal battles almost exclusively, I don't know that I can think of another example other than this, is there will be a treasure chest in some fights. And depending upon the dungeon you're in or the area that you're in, there will be like 1 to 2 different or 3 different ones of those. And so basically you need to use a turn to get the treasure out of the treasure chest. And sometimes people suck at apparently opening treasure chests and don't successfully do it. I think the thing that annoyed me a little bit about that is there was some times where it's like I just run around in an area to try to get that fight back because I was killing things too fast. So it's basically you'd have to sit there and defend until somebody yoinks the treasure chest, and then it's like, okay, now I can kill the things, because I definitely ran into that issue a couple times.
I ran into 2 treasure chests. One I opened, the other one didn't open. I'm like, all right, well, just screw these things. I'm just not going to touch them anymore. Why did you obsess about opening the treasure chest, Burns?
Because you get stuff out of them. You get recipes.
You get stuff all the time from everywhere.
There are certain chests
specific.
You do want to open all those and see some, because there are certain quest items you get from that help you recruit individuals. So, like, I think one is like a golden pocket watch or something like that helps you get another guy. So it's important that you get those when you see them, right? Because, it is a lot of times recipes or a unique piece of armor, but there's those a few times where you're like, oh, this is the thing I need to go get this character that I talked to, 4 days ago, where it was, my last play session.
And pro tip, don't then turn around and sell that stuff because then it's to get that thing, to get that person that's holding back your base building. It sometimes is like 2 areas away for you to do it, and you're kind of setting yourself back. So, be careful about that.
I have no regrets. Mike, I'll turn to you here. You've played every FromSoft game, and a lot of FromSoft bosses have a certain gimmick or hook to them. In general, do you like gimmicky boss fights, and how well did this game execute those concepts?
As long as the gimmick itself makes sense for the boss and the arena, I'm fine with it, although I don't want them to be overdone, which I think they did pretty well here. They had them here and there, but they weren't the main focus of every boss fight. So they just had him in there once in a while as a kind of a change of pace, which I like. I think that was very clever, and they did it with just kind of the right light touch to make it, a nice change, but not to the point where you get sick of it.
Now, most of us got about halfway through this game. Mike, you finished it. Are there any particularly notable gimmicks that you recall from your time with this game?
I did like the one where you used the tank quite a bit, and then the one in the water cave against the, I guess we'll call it was it a squid boss or an octopus boss, where you had to change the level of the water, I thought was really appropriate and pretty clever. I think that was probably the best usage.
So one thing that I still found with this battle system at that midway point, right, was it was still kind of basic, right? I didn't have a lot of hero combos, and I found that even if I used the hero combo, for the most part, I'm like, oh, I could have just used an individual attack with both of these characters, and it would have done close to the same amount of damage, so that I could have really just done that and had more control. Does that continue to change at all in that second back half of the game? Do you see the combat expand out and giving you more options, or is this just really kind of hey, the hero combos are cool, but you really don't see them happen that often?
It expands a little bit, probably not as much as it should have. Although in the final dungeon, you have a set group of characters for the most part in the final dungeon, including one really important combo attack, which frankly made that last dungeon a lot easier to do than it would have been if you didn't have it. But that's really the only time I can say where that's true, honestly.
I wish there were more. Oh, go ahead, John.
I just feel like that's a huge miss, right? I love Chrono Trigger, right? And the combo attacks are one of the coolest things about Chrono Trigger, right? Everybody can do something with somebody else and this and that. And you have all these crazy characters, and yet I'm not seeing awesome combos between everyone like I was hoping I would.
And just to pile on that point for a minute, Chrono Trigger, as your characters level up, they unlock more individual abilities which fuel group abilities. So as you play through the game, your hero combos just get bigger and more flexible, and I also drew that comparison.
Yeah, and the hero combos in Eiyuden are very much just like Suikoden, right? So it's one of those things where there's certain people that kind of already have a history together, and so they will have some sort of a hero combo that they can do with each other, and that's always kind of been what it's based upon. It would be cool if they had some of those develop as the game went on, or I don't think that that's the case in this. You could correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I think that would be cool if they would evolve that a little bit more.
Burns,
I agree.
Burns, you want a full-blown Persona relationship system layered on top too?
No, I don't need that. Like, this game already has enough other side stuff that you're doing that I don't know that you need to have some sort of relationship management simulator. I don't know, like, I feel like modern RPGs are a little too overly influenced by, like, the Persona sort of system, and, like, constantly needing to have the main character be shipped with somebody, or end up in a relationship with somebody or multiple people. And I feel like fans almost force that narrative too much in games, or are forcing that on developers to say, well, I really think that these two characters should be together, blah, 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 blah. I think if it makes sense in a story beat that would be the case, to include that in there at times. But I don't know that it's necessarily needed in Eiyuden or all RPGs.
I totally ship Noah. I ship Noah with an entire harem. My favorite party composition was Periel, and I think Sabine, and the teleporter Carrie. She was my favorite character, and I can't remember who the other two were, but it was Noah and 5 ladies, and it was awesome.
A couple of things about the battle system that I want to get off my chest. I will say that, so I think they missed the boat a little bit on the SP system, mostly just because, so SP basically, every sort of step of the battle you gain an SP, a skill point, I believe is what it stands for. I don't know what it stands for, to be honest, but that's my guess. And those are what you spend to do hero combos or to do special abilities that aren't magic, right? You'll use MP for your magic abilities, but you'll use SP then for these special abilities. And I just don't understand why, if you have a series of battles in a row, that always, like, resets down to some random result. Like, I'd finish a battle with 5 SP on one character, have a battle in a minute, and they've got 0. And it's just like, I can understand if it, like, attritioned a little bit between fights. If there's, like, the longer time, the more it would go down. But it seemed like it was just completely random. It's like, oh, okay, this person has 3. I can do this right away at the start. This person has 0. Looks like I'm just doing basic attacks until I can do the thing that I want to do with them. So that's one thing that I wish there was a rhyme or reason to how that carried between fights, so that I could manipulate that and set myself up and have a little bit more strategy with how I'm using them, instead of just, oh, it's there, I can hit that button instead of the normal button.
Yeah, 2 quick things. I looked it up. SP stands for Sludge Potato.
Of course.
And I am absolutely with you. That also drove me crazy. I don't know why it was random. I don't know why sometimes I'd start with 1 or 2 or 3, or like, it's like, I don't know what I can fire my hero combo because I don't know what I'm walking into this battle with. And totally with you.
There were ways you could manipulate that, though. You could set your guys up to have extra SP points at the start of the fight through a couple different ways, using the runes or the support characters, if you really want to.
Except for the support character, like the one time where the game told you, hey, you got to have this character as your support character. Otherwise, it was always Cassandra, because I'd always want to swap my people out at any save point. Like,
I never used her.
Never ever.
Oh, I always used her constantly, because my whole way that I approach any of these things is, oh, hey, this is going to be a really good leveling spot, so get everybody to 38, and then once the whole party is at 38, go back to the save point, swap people out, send them back there. But anyway, Code L, he's supposed to give you SP at the start of battle, except for he does it whenever the heck he pleases. It's like once in a blue moon, like a fart in the wind. He's like, oh, hey, take this. And you start with an SP, and it's like, oh, thanks, buddy. Where were you the last 9 fights? Jesus. Sorry, I got a little hot and bothered about that, because it's just like, all right, well, let me use this ability, and it just popped up once. It's just like, well, thanks a lot.
And to pile on, the SP doesn't matter, right? Like, look, eventually you're going to level your characters up in the zone you're in enough that, yeah, you want to use your SP attack because it's going to let you finish the battle a little quicker, but it's really not going to drastically impact those just random encounter battles once you get over that first initial, like, oh, I'm in a new zone and these guys are tougher than the last guys I fought piece. As soon as you level up a little bit, right, your main party, even if you're switching out one or two guys to level up, is going to be doing that kind of generic attack. So you're missing one round of, like, it's basically, instead of starting with your special attack, you attack normal first, then do your special attack.
Let me ask you guys about leveling methodology, because Burns, I believe you like to level everyone up in every area, right? Like, you will use Cassandra at save points to constantly switch up your party, correct?
For the most part. There'll be times where I'll, like, just keep trying to push something along if I'm in the middle of something. But usually if I find an area where it's like, oh, okay, these people are going to be able to jump up pretty quickly, then I'll just do that. I'll cycle through people fast and, take 30 minutes to run through an area a bunch and do that.
Interesting. My strategy is a little bit different. I like to stick with characters through an area, but each time I get into a new story area outside of, like, when a character is required, like, I'll generally grab my lowest level dudes and bring them into the party. So, like, the last play session I had, I brought in, what's the dude in the pink coat? Yusuke? Yusuke. I hadn't used him since the very beginning of the game. I'm like, oh, these kicks are kind of fun. And, like, that's kind of how I bridge the gap between my higher and lower level characters. So I'm just curious how John and Mike approached leveling your vast squad of characters.
Oh, I guess I'll go.
Oh. Go ahead,
We're
Mike.
waiting for each other. Generally, the thing with this game, you don't have to try that hard because the leveling system is so kind on giving huge amounts of experience to low-level characters. It doesn't take that long to get anybody up to speed, which is something I love about this series, Suikoden, and this game. You don't have to grind forever to get somebody who's way behind on levels to catch up, because they catch up like lightning in just a few battles. So I would just rotate my guys in on what I thought might be interesting groupings that might have hero combos or might have story, significance to each other just as experiments. I'd be like, okay, this guy and this guy seem to have something in common. Well, they have an attack, so I'd throw them into a party. Because I wasn't worried about leveling. As long as I had a decent healer, I figured I'd get through the dungeon with whoever I put in there because they would catch up on levels in just a few fights.
And real quick, before we let John answer, best healer in the game is?
I mean, it depends on how you want to use your runes. There are several of them I thought that...
You're right, it's
you
Girin.
could go
Yeah.
Francesca's really good.
Nope, Girin.
But there are several other ones I think were just as useful.
Yep, it's Girin.
Girin, so you added a water rune to him so he could heal?
I added the Rune of Currents to him so he could do some water magic and heal.
Ah, got it. Okay, I see.
I liked him because of his conservation rune. He used less magic points with his heals, which was my big draw.
Got it. I see. I ended up using Isha a lot from Eiyuden Chronicle Rising once I unlocked her because it just felt like she acted fast, and so I was able to use that to my advantage. So yeah, that's why I used her as my healer.
Also, where was she?
Back in Eltisweiss.
Huh.
Yeah, you go back and you go all the way to the right, and she's collecting. She's trying to like give out badges for her town because she's the mayor of the town, and you have to go do a bunch of stamps. Yes, I used her as well. She's my favorite healer because look, time is a resource. This is finite as a old man with kids and a job and all these things. So while I love collecting all these people, I really don't want to have the guy sitting in my party that is F tier. I want S tier party, man. So the first thing I do is all right, I'm going around collecting all these people and I have 60 people to choose from. Who actually is going to do damage? So then I look at my S and A and B tiers. I'm like, okay, I'll make a party out of these guys. So that's how I did it. And anybody else who didn't make that, sorry, they don't even get it. They don't even make it into my party because, I ain't wasting my time on you, right? The only thing I didn't look at is, and we'll get into this probably a little bit more when we talk about some of the other battle systems, but you have the major, huge battle. And when you have those major battles, your team is made up of everybody that you've recruited. So I don't know if the level of those recruited characters impacts those larger battles or not. But it never impacted me at all. So I was like, no, I just want the top tier people that can come through and mow everything down.
Way to min-max, dude. I didn't look at attack at all. I basically made aesthetic choices for my party. Throughout this game, you spend a lot of time in dungeons. There are typical JRPG dungeons. There are like themed dungeons that you have to go into for very well-reasoned story reasons. There's also dungeons where you're traversing from spot to spot and you're encountering random monsters. Burnsy, you play a lot of RPGs. How did the dungeons in Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes stack up against some of your favorites?
It was varied a little bit. So they have kind of a couple of different... So they have what I called anyway, I don't think that's... I don't even know if they have a name for it in the game. Like exploration dungeons is what I called it. So there's like a few dungeons that you can go to that are... They're like areas on the map, and you go in there, and basically as you hit story beats, more of the area opens up. And I really like the concept of that. I really just wish there was a clearer signposting to say, oh, hey, this happened. We should go back to the dappled forest now. I bet you we could see everything. Instead of, I really need this one frickin' thing to get the next level of my base, and I'm running all the way through here to get up to the center, and then like they're just like, nope, can't walk past, and just invisible wall, invisible wall, invisible wall. So that was the only thing I really wish they did with those. Otherwise, I thought they each looked cool, and they had the utility in that each of them tended to have sort of a grouping of like the upgrade resources that you needed for as you were sort of leveling up your base. And so that's why they continued to stay relevant, because as you got to the deeper parts of that area, you were then able to use, you needed some of those materials to then upgrade some of the deeper portions of your base building. And so I really liked how the interplay was between those. Eventually, as you unlock more things with the base building, you need that less and less, because you can just farm some crazy amounts of things as long as you're in the game with like the mission guild or the guild missions.
So one thing they do somewhat drive you back to these zones, right? And it's through the characters that you need. So if you're exploring throughout the different towns, I did have several of those zones where it's like, oh, hey, go back to this forest or this thing because I need you to do this, or find this lost child, or whatever it might be. And you'd go back there and like, oh, now I can move a little bit further. I can move past the guard that was there before, and now I can get better resources, right? So it does guide you a little, but yeah, I find it kind of annoying. We're like, well, now I got to walk all the way through this dungeon I've already been through, right? Where the first monsters here don't increase in level. So now I'm wasting my time going back through the dappled forest, right? Through the first half of it, right? And if I change my character and I forgot to switch the dash ring over to the character I'm on, I'm going half as slow, right? So it was annoying to me, where I'm like, gosh, to me, those dungeons scream, this is a Kickstarter game. Because it really does say, like, oh, they had limited resources. So what are we going to do? We had to gate some of this. So we're going to say, we actually have 3 dungeons in one here, but I don't want to have to recreate assets or this or that. So we're just going to block off half of it. And you come back, and then we're going to make the stronger monsters right past this guy. And I think that would have been okay if they just would like, don't put the guy there, right? Oh, I walked in here and they just rolled me? Great. I know I can't go there until I'm level XYZ. At least then it's not like an invisible wall. I just know I shouldn't go there, right? But like, yeah. So they do lead you a little bit. I didn't like those dungeons.
Mike, your thoughts?
I didn't mind that, honestly. I just, I think it's just this style of game. I'm going to hit a story beat. I'll take a big circle through the world, try to recruit some characters, see if there's sections I can get into I couldn't hit before. And you didn't have to fight the low-level monsters, a really good thing. You could just, let them go, which it would have been a lot worse for me if you had to fight the low-level monsters all the time going through that. Mm-hmm. But they were nice enough to, have a way around that, which was very helpful. So I didn't mind. I like wandering around and just, seeing what's changed since the last time I wandered through, and see if I can find any characters tucked away in the corners, which a lot of times you did, because there's a whole lot of characters.
Oh, yeah. And to what you said before, John, yeah, there was 3 accessories that would always go on one of my characters when I'd create a new group, and would always come off of those characters when they left my group. It's the Dash Boots. It's the Super Lucky Charm, I think it was called, which is increased drops from enemies. And then it was the Wealthy Charm, I think it was called, which gives you more Bakwa out of the fights. And it's like, yep, those 3 are coming off of somebody. Those 3 accessories are going on any of the other people we're adding to them. They have something else that's really cool. Sorry, we need to move faster.
I used Jankwist to solve the Baka problem, but where did you find the Dash Boots and the Super Lucky Charm? I don't believe I had those items.
Boy. Dash Boots are in the mine. You get them very early in the mine. The Super Lucky Charm, I can't remember where
they were
I got
in one of the dungeons, the one where you fight the golem, I believe, at the end of it. I think you got it there because that's the one where you get all those things you could sell after you get them identified, and with that thing on, you get like 50 of them walking through there.
And you can make a ton of money.
Yep. Yeah, money was not, honestly, after 2 or 3 hours, at first I was worried about money, but then once you started getting going on money, man, I had money to spare after a while.
Well, so I always referred to it with the original Suikoden games as I had a sharpening problem, because that's what the ability was called. Because it's like, because literally there was probably 45 minutes of a stream at one point where I'm just sitting there because I grinded up a bunch of money, and then I'm just sitting there basically sharpening all of my tools to the max on every character. And just, ching, ting, 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 ting. So I have an issue where it's like, I want everybody to be at the same tier. And then as I get people that are at a higher tier, it's like, okay, how much do I need? I need 170,000 Bakwa in order to be able to level all these up. And then just go through and ding, 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 and update them. So, I mean, I'm making tons of money now, so it's not as much of a problem. But yeah, I have an issue with where it comes to that anyway.
So I wanted to go back to the dungeons real quick because, well, I do love the theming of all of them, and there was actually some really cool ones, especially like there's one that's tied to like like recruiting a character where you're trying to find like a lens that's in the belly of a monster, and that one was really cool. But a lot of these dungeons also have one of the worst mechanics you can ever do in any sort of dungeon is, hey, interact with something on the screen that then shoots you to another part of the dungeon. Whether it's, a whirlybird or, as everyone, if I've seen on your faces, the penis things that shoot you across the thing. Because, man, did those things look like horrible. Like, don't touch that. And then they shoot you out in a big old pile of goo. And I'm like, who designed this? Because that thing looks way too phallic to be shooting me across the screen and then landing in like a pile of goop. But that's an annoying thing. Like, just beyond, like, I mean, at least they made it funny looking and it was hilarious every time. But, like, you have no way to track, like, oh, where is this going to send me? And then I'm, like, opening my map and I'm like, okay, I'm here. Hopefully, now there's 2 of them on this. Which one of these sends me forward and which one of these sends me back? And if you pick the wrong one, then you got to go back and backtrack. And to me, that's just an annoying, time-wasting mechanic that is actually kind of lazy when you talk about dungeon design, right? Like, we'll just have a bunch of spots all over the map, and we're not going to really make any of this connect in any smart way. We're just going to make it kind of confusing so that you bop around a bunch until you have it really memorized, and then you'll get some leveling in along the way.
The first time you run into those forest wiener launcher thingers, like, just infuriating. Like, I had the hardest time getting out of that dungeon. I was just, if this didn't make me laugh every time it shot me, like, I would just be hating my life.
Am I weird that I didn't equate it to a penis until you mentioned it? I don't know why, but I didn't.
I mean, doesn't your penis, like, extend like an elephant trunk and, like, grab onto things and then, like, eject them across maps, Burns?
No.
Because, like, John and I do that all the time, right, John?
That's like half my day.
You should get that checked, honestly.
Yes.
What?
Well, and I think the other thing that some of these maps have an issue with, and part of it is related to that, John, is that you can only look at the map of the level that you're on, which really made it difficult to try to piece together then which of these things do I need to trigger to get to this other area, or like what part of the map haven't I been to yet? Like the most recent thing that I did was the ice cave, and it has a similar part of that, and it's just like I kept missing the one last thing to get me to the last area, and I went back up through that thing like 2 times extra because I was just having a hard time visualizing, okay, which path didn't I go down yet? And so yeah, I wish they would have had the ability when you were looking at the map to toggle the floor. So then it was like, okay, what probably leads to where and what did I miss? Because it was really hard to just sort of remember and visualize that after bouncing around between things, as well as having random battles sort of kicking you out of your puzzle-solving mindset. And then you have to get back to it. It's like, okay, where the heck was I? So that became an annoyance in some of the dungeons that did a lot of that, jerking you around different places.
Well, let's talk about the ice caves a little bit more, because I wound up spending 30 hours with this game. The last 20 hours were a very high for me. I really, really enjoyed this game. But those Galdarn ice caves, and that was a narrow save since I don't edit the show, but those Galdarn ice caves, a lot of the things you have to traverse, you have to freeze yourself into a block of ice, and then you have to fiddle the stick back and forth to unfreeze, which doesn't sound that bad. Where it becomes a problem is you're shooting down these icy slopes and you have to stop in a specific spot. Otherwise, you'll cross a point of no return and you have to go all the way to the bottom, climb your bottom back up to the top, and try it again and hope that you can fiddle the stick enough to break in the right point.
For a second, I thought you were going to say you spent the last 20 hours in the ice cave. I was like, oh, Tom, no.
These maps are really confusing, Burns. One of the ways this game pays homage to its spiritual predecessors was through a base building system. We mentioned a couple of times already, but you can expand your castle as you gather resources and recruit new allies. How engaging was the base building, and did the system change the way you approached the game? I got my question out. Why isn't anyone speaking?
We weren't sure you were okay.
Yeah.
I asked Phoenix to make me a drink before I quite finished the one that I had, and she took it. I'm like, no, I gotta finish this, but I gotta finish the question, and you guys are all just staring at me.
I will say that this process really, to me, this is my favorite part of the game. The base building and then collecting the characters to upgrade your base. And it changed the way I did it. Like, I played, the majority of the stuff I've played was all about recruiting characters. I think that it was done in like a fantastic fashion. There's just enough breadcrumbs to make you want to like, oh, I only need one more resource, or if I just find this character. And the way they do the actual base building is fantastic, right? So you get a cool grid, right? And it says, oh, you can update this thing or build this one. And it will tell you what you need in resources, and it will have a silhouette of a person if you haven't found them. And if you have, it'll show their picture. You're like, oh, that's the guy from this area. And if you forget where that guy is, you can go pay 300 bakwa, and they'll tell you, oh, he's in the mines, or he's there. So you could go get that guy, explore that area, find 3 more people, right? And then if you need to know, well, what resource do I need to have? Oh, I need, wood, or I need stone, or I need iron. You can just press triangle on that node, or Y, or whatever you're playing on, and it would pull up and say, oh, it's in these 4 locations. So you were never lost from that standpoint. To me, I was just, it was fantastic because I just run around. I'll go to this dungeon. I'll find this guy. I'll get this resource. I'll go back. The only annoying thing about the entire thing is, and I will give this as a pro tip, it's slightly spoilery, but pro tip, if you are going to get the blacksmith, do not go back with your iron ore back into town, because whenever you would go back into town, any of your resources just get taken by the town. It's a great feature. Hey, take all this. I don't want it. But there's one character you recruit who says, hey, go find me 10 iron ore. So I had like 30, 40 iron ore at my base. I'm like, sweet, I'll just go grab some and go see this guy. No, you can't withdraw anything from your bank. I had to go and like collect it. And then I kept on like, I'm like, oh, sweet, I found like an iron ore point right outside of town in the mines. So I was like, I'll just go back and forth. So I collected a bunch. I had like 8. I go into town to like reset it, and then they take all my iron. I was like, you jerks. So
You said the base building was fantastic. I found it more frustrating. Like, generally, I like base building in the Suikoden games, and there were elements that I liked here. I really struggled with the gates that kept you from certain resources and not being able to find all the allies. Like, I am a cheapskate, and I did not like paying to know where the allies were. Like, I'm like, I'll find them if I find them. Like, I'm poking around everywhere that I go. I fast traveled all the towns and, like, talked to everybody to try to discover as many people as possible. But I constantly ran into issues where I'm like, oh, I just can't upgrade this thing. I can't upgrade this thing. I have this cool grid, but I can't upgrade any of it because I don't have any pelts set. I don't know where Mystic Lumber is.
I think at your point, Tom, at like earlier on, initially right when it opens up, I'm like, oh, I have all this stuff that I can do, and I don't know where to get anybody. And it reached like a tipping point after I'd walked around and I'd talked to a whole bunch of people. And I'm like, oh, now I see all these people that I know I need to collect. So it made it fun to go back and get those guys. Like, oh, there's the guy that I have to give the shiny stuff to. I haven't gotten those yet. And then I would catch the shiny stuff. Like, now I can fast travel and we'll get the shiny guys so I can buy the accessories and this and that. It gave me the little breadcrumbs to keep going through the game. I can see where that would be frustrating though if like you're like constantly just like at that stopping point. Because until I figured out press triangle and I could see, oh, I can get this resource here to go find my, Mystic Lumber. I was at that point. He was like, well, I can't get anything. And I was like, oh, wait, I can just go here. And then, oh, if I go back to the Dapple Forest, I can go further. And then the loop clicked for me.
Yeah, I never found out the triangle thing until speaking with you, so maybe I'm an idiot and I don't know how to read on-screen prompts, but like, I need Mystic Lumber. Right, I'm like, oh, so go to this woods, go to these woods, go to these woods. Finally go to the Dappled Forest. Oh, great, I found my lumber. Progress. Great.
Yeah, I ran into, I guess, I didn't run into an issue finding people to recruit because of just the way that I kept going around through, like, so very early on, hearkening back to, like, Suikoden and Suikoden 2, it was really difficult to know where characters were. So when I played through those and I wanted to get all the characters, I definitely used guides for that. So at first, after I would get to like certain story beats, I would go back and I found like a spoiler-free like character guide. And that helped click it in my head, sort of how they do it. So like once you get done with a main story beat, run back through everywhere you've been.
Oh no, not every town. People. Tell me it's not every town, Burns.
Oh yeah, people pop up in random towns all the time. Yeah, but once you get teleportation, it's not that hard. You get the teleport, you put the dash boots on, you run through the town. The people that are recruitable stand out like a sore thumb, so you can easily see them. You run up to them, you start talking to them, and you're good to go. And so that was like one of the big things that I learned early on, so I just did that like every time. And, it hasn't really caused me too much pain to go back through, especially once you unlock teleportation, because then it's like super easy. What I ran into, though, is there are a couple of gates in the base building that are specific to resources that you just can't get yet. And that would just drive me up a wall, given the fact that, like, I've maxed out everything here. I need, like, these two things. It's like, I need the Fisher guy, because there's, like, 4 things I can unlock past him, but I just need that guy. But I can't get that guy because I need to fish for something that I can't get to a spot where I can fish for it yet. And then it's like, the other one was, it was like the lacquer to upgrade the town to the next level. And it's just like, I'm like maxed out on resources in my town at this point, selling stuff off just to make more money. Oh, my money's maxed out just because I haven't gotten to the point where I could get the lacquer yet. And so that got a little frustrating, but ultimately I've learned now that it's like, at that point you stop doing side stuff and you push the story forward so that you can get those things. And so I think that's sort of forcing you to balance between like getting caught up in a lot of the side things and refocusing on the fact that, there's this sort of war that's brewing that you need to take care of. Don't forget about this crap, Noah. You'll make friends as time goes on, So yeah, I think that's the way they try to balance it that way. Now that I've sort of realized that that's the way the game works, I'm working around that at this point. So that's that's been helpful too.
Sure, and Mike, your perspective having beaten the game, were you satisfied with how the entire base building system worked? And like looking back, what advice would you have for people just starting on Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes?
I love the base building. It's my favorite thing for Suikoden, and so the thing that I think they hit best that evokes that is the way that as you build it, your group up, it builds up your base. And they're not just people that you get on your checklist because you wander around your base, and all of a sudden there's a guy behind this counter. There's now a store here where there wasn't before. Recruited him. Now you've got a blacksmith of your own. Now you've got a capybara running a hot spring. I mean, it adds so much flavor to the world as your base builds up and as these characters start, being available just to walk by and see them. You can go in the library now because you've got a librarian. It makes the world feel so much better as your base grows. And eventually you get the guy who can make decorations, so you can build flags and decorative trees and lights, and you can upgrade your room that you sleep in, and it's just there's this constant feeling that you're pushing forward and improving that is incredibly satisfying loop once you get going into it.
Yeah.
I think that those are the two strengths of this game, and have always been the two strengths of the Suikoden series, that these sort of diverse groups of characters that you find with each of them having like unique personalities, and in this game all of them fully voiced, so you really get that sense of who these people are, which I think is great. And then it's like the flavor that they add to your town and how their personality is shown up on the screen. And I guess a question I had for you, Mike, because I know you've played a lot of the later Suikoden games also. Because the base building, if I remember from 1 and 2, is more so just you got the person and so everything's there. It wasn't actually like, you didn't have like this sphere grid like we had in this, where in Eiyuden, where you choose to upgrade each of these different things, right? Were there any of them, like 3 or 4, that got to that point, or was it more so just you
4
recruited
didn't have the same kind of base building as the other ones did, because on 4 you were on a ship, so it was all on the ship. But no, I don't remember any of them really having that choice option. It's just that you get the other characters, they would fall into their place in the base, and their store would open, or what have you. But I don't remember there being much in the way of choosing what path you take as far as upgrading the way you do here, which is another nice little bonus. And it's also got to be said, recruiting characters in this game is way easier than it was in any prior Suikoden game. There's nothing here that's nearly as frustrating as trying to get all the squirrels in Suikoden 2 or something. This is just a lot easier across the board.
Just wandering on the road for ages.
Squirrels.
Oh, yes, the squirrels.
Well, on a similar vein, what was the most interesting thing you had to do to recruit a character in this game, Mike?
Ooh, maybe interesting is the wrong word, but there are multiple characters that are connected to the minigames that you have to do. And for some of them, you had to do a lot of minigames if you wanted to get these characters. I don't know if you call that interesting, but it made it challenging.
Sure. And which one of those was your favorite, and which minigame was it tied to?
Favorite is probably not the word for it. I did actually kind of oddly like the way you got the Eggfoot lady and her announcer guy. So silly the way that worked out. I was not happy with the people connected to Bagoma, because that was way too complicated. But I also really like there's I don't know if explorer is the right word, but one of those big blue guys who you have to go through a whole dungeon to recruit him, basically. He takes you to the castle dungeon, and you have to fight your way through that to recruit him. And so if you don't talk to him, I don't think it's possible to go to that dungeon at all. So it's entirely linked to recruiting him if you're going to even see that content, which I thought was really clever.
Bernsey, your favorite?
Favorite to recruit. So I think one of them that has the most old school Suikoden way to recruit them, I guess, to an extent, is Hogan, which is one of them that I have the ability to recruit right now, but I haven't yet. And to get him, you have to basically make 50,000 Bakwa off of the trading posts in the game. And that the trading posts, the iconography on the trading posts in every Suikoden game always misled me. And it still does it in Eiyuden. It's like, oh, 2 blue arrows. That means I should sell stuff here. No, because because the arrows just mean that the demand in that city is high, but the price for that stuff might still be lower than other areas. So basically, it got down to the point where, do I really want to spend the time to write down all these different things that sell?
I created a spreadsheet specifically for the trading.
Blah.
Because I had to. It's the only way I could figure it out. So I have a spreadsheet with all the locations with trading posts and all the things that they sell. And if I went there, I would check the prices, and anything I bought, I would jot down what I paid for it, so I know if I was selling for a profit or not when I sold it.
So that double up arrow for like 104% and that double down arrow for like 94%, that wasn't actually indicating a change in price on those things?
Change in price at that trading
At that
post.
location.
But that location might not be the best place to sell something. It might be... I realized that, like, I started to think that was the case, because it's like, I could have sworn I bought these things for like 400 somewhere, but it's like 2 blue arrows up and it's 250 here. And so, like, after I told it, I was like, did I actually make money off of that? And I realized a little bit later, nope, I sure did not.
So you can lose a lot of money that way if you just were trying to follow the arrows and letting them tell you. Because, it's all about location. Because some locations, something you got really cheap, you'd go somewhere else and they would have the arrow up. You're thinking, oh, this is great, but it would only be maybe slight profit or maybe even a loss. Or you go to another place where the arrow's down, but because their base demand is so high to start with, you're still making a massive profit selling it there. So you really had to pay attention to what actually paid for something more or so than any of the arrows.
So, like, why? Why is this feature in the game? Why is this side thing in the game? And Burns, do you honestly think that is fun? You hate looking outside of a game for things, so, like...
I didn't say it was fun. I would say that that's the most old-school Suikoden way to recruit someone, where it's like this sort of set of things that you need to do, and it's a lot more difficult than it should be in order to get that. I mean, the most rewarding person to recruit, I think, was CJ. Because after you recruit Guru and Isha, then you can recruit CJ. And, you know, I don't want to spoil it because I know you played Rising, Tom, and I know that you're probably going to keep playing this game whenever you get a chance to play it. But then, like, the sort of quest that you go on with CJ and Guru and Isha, I think was really cool and a really good payoff to, those characters if you spent a lot of time with them in Rising.
Yeah, let's talk about Rising real quick. This Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes was a Kickstarter game, and as part of reaching their stretch goals, they also created the spin-off sub-game Eiyuden Chronicles Rising, which ties into this game, but I saw Guru. I never found Isha, so I'm just curious, Burns, knowing that you loved Rising, how well did these games tie together?
Yeah, so I mean, those 3 characters are in it. There's also a few other characters that are in this game that were in Rising. So Hogan runs the trading post in New Nevea.
Melior and
Ayugo, who's like the samurai that's like a bodyguard there, is also in. He's one of the first characters you get in Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes. But then I think some of the other things that are cool is if you... So when you level up your weapons in Rising, once you get to a certain level, you get to rename the weapons, and you don't get to type them out. You choose from a series of names to have them there. But if you had that save of Rising, that carries forward into the game. Also, in Rising, you create a item in that's going to be the thing that the town's known for. And you get to name it, and then that's the name that shows up on all the trading posts for where you can buy that item and sell it at different trading posts. So those are some of the cool little things that carry forward from Rising into Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. So I think it's really well done. I don't believe you get to go to New Nevea at all. If you do, it's like way later in the game. So, but yeah, you do get to see some of those characters and recruit some of them, and it's kind of cool. Then, like the dialogue that pops up between, like especially like CJ, Guru, and Isha. So yeah. Though I will say their hero combo, like it. So if you played Rising, when you do the attacks and you like do the link attack afterwards, and it does like the little snap sound. Like, the hero combo is really cool, but it needed the snaps in between each one of them when they jump on to do the next attack, because then that would have been, like, perfect representation of what it was in Rising. But that was minor quibble. Oh,
well, I'm glad they executed that well. John, we didn't give you a chance to speak. The most interesting character you recruited?
Interesting character? Boy, I mean, the funnest recruiting thing I think I did was the one I mentioned earlier, where you had to run around. You're finding a rune lens inside the belly of a beast. It was just a cool boss battle, and you ended up going through a pretty cool dungeon, right? I like those ones where you're like, oh, I'm going to go do something with this character, and then they join your team. So I really like that one. I forget what her name was, right?
Yeah, Hammer Lady.
On my spreadsheet into my party. So, but that was a cool way to get there. She's got a cool hammer, and I've never used her, but yeah, I really enjoyed that. I did also like the Eggfoot racing girl and the announcer. Once you get them, like that's a really funny, fun scene, and to me is one of the best highlights of like why this game shines is. Oh, I love this character. I love these characters in this world they're in, and they're just fun. So I really enjoyed those two.
Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes has several mini-games and optional side things that you can engage with, including Begoma, a battle-top diversion. There's a separate card game, and several others that I didn't get to. Before I ask you guys if you enjoyed these diversions, I have to ask, what's an Eggfoot and what's an Eggfoot race?
I don't know if you ever fought one, but they're the little round birds, basically, that look like they're, look like they swallowed a giant egg, so they're shaped like an egg, basically, with little feet.
It's like some of the first enemies that you fight in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have some eggs that I've just been carrying around with me forever, and I didn't know what to do with them. And like, you can hatch an Eggfoot. If you recruit
the Eggfoot lady and her buddy, they build an Eggfoot racetrack, and then you can breed them and race them, kind of like the Chocobo breeding and racing in Final Fantasy VII.
Awesome.
But again, she's annoying to recruit if you don't have those, because then you need to go walk around outside of your base, right? With the
I didn't do any of that. I just bought all the eggs once I got her.
Right? No, but like to recruit her, you have to have 5 regular eggs, and I didn't have 5 regular eggs. So it's like, now I have to spend some time and like hopefully get these guys, and hopefully they drop the eggs. I was like, okay, cool, now I got it.
Interesting that I didn't even know that existed. Mike, what was the most interesting side content, in your opinion, in this game?
Well, it wasn't Begoma, because I did not, watch that anime at all, so I really didn't get very far through that. I didn't do the boat racing either. I did a lot of the card game, and I did a lot of the Eggfoot racing. For some unknown reason, I kind of got obsessed with Eggfoot racing for a while. But I'd have to say the card game. It's actually a pretty simple but fun little collectible card game. It's worth the time if you're into that style of game. It's actually a solid little card game. But there's just a whole lot of, if you want to complete that particular side activity, you have to beat every single character you recruit. Progressive, and they each have better cards as you go, so it gets to be quite the challenge to beat them all.
In 30 hours of this game, I played the card game once, and then I never saw the dude again. I didn't recruit him. I saw his spiky hair on my grid.
You didn't recruit him?
No,
you could recruit him right after you played him, if you beat him.
Yeah. Did you beat him?
I don't think I beat him.
No.
That would be it then.
You didn't beat him.
Oh, all right. So he's just gone forever? Like, I can't go back to recruit him?
Oh, no, he's still around. You just go beat him.
Yeah, just go back to where he was.
Probably still exactly where he was.
Yep.
I don't think he was, because I would have just played it again.
Maybe you did recruit him and he's just in your base and you didn't realize it.
Or you didn't build out the card place yet?
Oh, that could be. Yeah, if you haven't built the card place for him in your base, even if he's recruited, you're not going to be able to do the mini game.
And I don't think that I can build the card base because I need him to build the card base.
Okay, yeah, then you didn't beat him, or you didn't talk to him after you beat him. One of the.
Huh. Awesome. Bernsey, your thoughts on the side content in Eiyuden Chronicles?
I mean, it's really easy to get sidetracked. Going back to Begoma,
Which sucks.
so it's one of those things. It's all dependent upon actually randomly from a drop from enemies getting better tops so that you can actually beat people. So I was lucky to get a Bear Rider top. That's a rank B. That's a 2-star that I was able to use as an anchor to beat like a lot of the sort of lower tier things. So I did get through like the first kind of story progression beat of that and was able to recruit the doctor. But there's still so much more of that. And now like the story missions are like so much more difficult. So it's just like, yeah, that's back on the sideline. But I did play more of it. I did get better at it. I can beat like the nameless NPCs a lot of the time, unless I see that they have like the 3-star tops that just, look so much better. I don't even face them at that point. I would say though, one of the more interesting, so the two things, the most useful side content is the guild missions. So Gokto, who you recruit as part of the story early on, once you build the guild mission stand, basically you're able to send out people that you don't have in your active party out to basically perform these missions and gather resources for you is basically what it is.
Final Fantasy Tactics style. Nice. Also, how do you get Gokto to freaking do something? He's just standing in my base. He's been standing there for a long time.
It's a part of the tree, right? And it's one of those ones that's kind of hidden behind the fishermen and this and that. Like it's in the upper right-hand corner. Like you have this guy the entire time, and you're like, I just want to build that thing. But like they want you to, I think, explore the world before you have access to that. Send the guys who'll get stuff, right? It's they gate him because it would break the exploration aspect.
Well, I've run into at least 2 characters that also said, hey, what's Gokto up to? Like, I would totally go, join you if he was a part of your organization. I'm like, he is. Like, I'll take a selfie with him. I'll bring it over to you.
Yeah, you can't get them until you build the...
You need to get the fishermen to open up a lot of that side.
You have to go fish in a certain spot and collect one fish from that spot. Sign off about 30 minutes to an hour of your life for that piece.
Nope. Nope, just not going to do it.
I want to circle back, though. I forgot to mention, in some ways, I think that the neatest of the side activities is the playhouse. Did you guys build the playhouse?
Nope.
Yeah, that's one of the most recent things I did. And like right before we jumped on here is the first time I actually experienced it. That was what I was going to say is probably my favorite one.
I'll let you talk about that. I just want to make sure we did talk about it because it needs to be talked about.
So, and I'll just spoil how to recruit this guy because you probably wouldn't go back up to there. But basically, there's a separate area that you go off to at one point, and I don't know that you go back. Maybe you do go back later in the game. But there is a person that you recruit back in Ardenale, and he is basically the person who will be the director of the playhouse. And so basically, it's every single character that you've recruited. You choose them to play roles in a play, and then you get to watch the play and see how it pans out. And, when you hover over the name and you're putting someone as the narrator or you're putting someone in as Romeo or Juliet, it'll sort of tell you like how good of an actor or bad of an actor this person is in the nicest way possible. But you basically just put combinations of them in there and see what happens. And there is some legitimately hilarious stuff that goes on. And I think the thing that's the coolest about this is that it's fully voiced. So every single character, like the voice actor for every single character recorded every single line for each part in the play as that character. And so a lot of the fun is trying to mix and match them, and then the better the production you put on, the higher the ranking you get. I think if you get an S ranking, you get special stuff. I haven't yet because it's too fun to just throw like people that are bad mixes together and see what craziness happens. So yeah, I think it's a really fun one. I definitely recommend that people should unlock that side content if you're not going to do a lot of the other ones, just because of how crazy it is. the mishmash of things that you can create with it.
Burns, you know there's a war going on, right? Like Perry and Yuma and like the dragon dude and that other dude who sounds like Humdinger from Paw Patrol.
You got to put Little Red Riding Hood on at the Playhouse and see how it goes. And if you don't get the casting for the Wolf Ride, that's on you, because that's the easiest casting in the entire game.
Sorry, guys. I was too busy over at the Chop Kitchen, right?
There's that.
Or,
that was fun, too.
That is fun.
I do like the
Iron
kitchen
Chef.
battle. Iron Chef action was pretty good. So that was my favorite, I think, out of the side content was the Iron Chef, because it was quick, it was funny, and it did not impact, like, there is an underlying, mafia cartel thing that's going to happen with it that I actually think is funny, tied to that, like these evil cooks and the kitchen mafia or whatever it is. I'm like, okay, I can get behind that, because it's just coming back and doing that thing. I couldn't get behind any of the other secondary content like that.
Well, I think I can summarize you guys' thoughts and say that the side content is really enjoyable, except I'd rather punch my own crotch than play more Begoma.
Agreed.
I mean, that's fine.
I would rather punch your crotch than play Begoma as well.
I'd probably like that better than Begoma as well. Now, spoiler alert. We're going to talk a little bit
Hold
about...
on 1 second.
Yeah.
Before we do that, I wanted to go back to something that we kind of glossed over. So, as far as progressing, to what extent do you guys actually go in and put runes in if there's a blank spot on your people? Do you guys do that immediately once one of those is unlocked? As soon as you go back to a lens person so you can do it? Or do you just gloss over it? And is there a certain point in the story where I need to do that? Otherwise, I'm going to start getting pounded by enemies. I just wanted your guys' thoughts on the lenses, because as your people progress, once they hit a certain level, a lens will unlock. And for some of the characters, it's just an ability that's specific to them that'll be that lens. But for other ones, they'll have a blank spot, so you can put one of these multitude of lenses that you unlock and then throw in your storage area almost immediately. So I guess I was curious how much you guys interacted with that and whether I should really be thinking about that more with some of my characters.
John, why don't you respond first, then we'll get Mike's perspective with the whole game under his belt.
Sure. So whenever I would add someone in, I would check it out and I'd be like, yeah. And my main thing with those items, because the slots are a little different, like you were saying, some of them are power up, and there's a passive one as well, right? Mm-hmm. So on my characters, what I would normally do is whenever I headed back into town or this or that, if I'm like, I've gained a bunch of levels, let me see if a slot opened up, or if you get the message within battle. And my goal was mainly to say, okay, do my healers have the magic they need? Have I gotten any special, Tom, you mentioned a certain rune that gives you better, the current rune, which gives you better water magic, right? I'm going to upgrade this guy to this one. The other thing was, all right, all my attack guys get the best plus strength, right, item they can, and my magic guys get the plus magic. That was just the key thing, because it's a 10% bump or whatever. And the final thing that I started doing, just to make sure of things, was in the passive slots, you can get a percentage bump on your characters for a certain stat based upon how much SP you have. So that's what I found was the most useful there, was, okay, let me get that in, but it's a minimal bump if you're always using your SP. But there's some characters where they don't have a very good skill, or they don't use any because you're just using them as magic users. So it can really bump their magic in a boss battle at the end, because now they have, a 25% bump because they haven't used any of their skill points.
And then the way I approached it, I mentioned how I'd filter other characters into my party. That was the time that I'd do the runes. I wouldn't usually take runes off of somebody and put them onto someone else unless I specifically wanted that rune of currents. But generally, I'd just do it when I did my party management, and I didn't fret about it too much. When I unlocked a new spot, it's oh, cool, well, we'll see if I ever use this character again, and if I go on to the next story mission, I'll probably put something in there. But Mike, how did you and how would you approach runes going forward?
I feel like maybe they could have done more with the runes than they did, so I did not put a huge amount of thought into it. Outside of healing, I'd always want to make sure my healing runes, I knew who had the good healing and, who was the party. So really, when I would set up a new party, I would go in and check the runes, and if they had open slots, then I would try to match open slots to what runes I had in storage to see if I could pull anything out that would be useful. As you go, I don't think it's ever really critical that your runes are really set up well, except for healing. But there are some nice incremental improvements you can make to parties by mixing and matching, the runes to give a little bit bump to this type of, usage, depending on how you use the character. For a frontline character, maybe the rune that gives them that extra, 20% damage reduction or something like that is really useful. Mm-hmm. For your magic user character, maybe that one that gives them better magic, or the one that gives them a starting bump to their SP can be really helpful for guys with good abilities. But it's nothing that is game breaking or game changing. It's a nice little bump as you go and you get all of those opened up and filled in.
And follow-up point in question, I didn't like that some characters had some runes that were locked on them. I found that frustrating. I wanted to be able to customize everyone's runes for everything. And did you guys ever find the enchantment runes to be helpful? Because there's like a rune of wind enchantment, water enchantment, fire enchantment, and like you could give an ally a fire sword, which sounds cool, but like in practicality, I much preferred the runes that gave me actual magic versus the enchantment ones. Mm-hmm.
I think they failed to really properly fully utilize the idea of, fire weakness and water weakness and light weakness. A few of the enemies, you could notice a difference, but it was not much of a difference most of the time. Not the way I would like to have seen it, where if you're fighting an undead enemy, your light magic really hammers them. It didn't seem to work that way for the most part. Well,
and like we were talking about the ice cave before, so it's like, oh, okay, use fire attacks against these guys. It's going to be great. I think the problem is a lot of those enemies have higher magic defense, so then the magic doesn't really matter against them. And so I think that might be the other portion of it, and it's really hard to know or understand if that's the case. So that's what I ran into. Is it's like, oh, I'm going to do a big fire attack against these guys, and I guess just bonking them on the head hurt more, so I'll just do that.
The abilities that give you a bonus to attack for your frontline guys were maybe the best of them. So obviously Noah's going to be doing a lot of your damage. So an ability that someone could throw on him to bump up his damage, at the start of the fight was really useful, far more so than fire sword or anything like that usually.
So instead of using elemental weapons, you should have just made them play Go Man. Those monsters would have killed themselves.
I will say it's a missed opportunity when you have a story that is so geared around these lenses. Mm-hmm. Right? Find the primal lens. Oh my gosh, these lenses, this and that. And then they actually are just kind of, I'll go throw them I'll sell them all, or I'll throw them in my treasure chest over here. Or they really don't impact your characters, right? They're these huge world impacting things that are supposed to be really unique, but then they turn out to kind of not be that special when you're actually utilizing them, except for when you see this person has a teleport rune, or this person has this special rune. I'm like, oh, well, those are cool. Why can't I use more of those abilities in the game or get more cool runes like that? I think that would have made that rune system a lot more fun and tie in better with the world.
I also think the other missed opportunity, I think, with it was that so you would fight certain bosses earlier in the game, and then you get you think a big rune, and it's like, oh, I got this rune, that's going to be awesome. But then it's like you get, a handful, half dozen story beats down the line, and you're in an area where they're just dropping those same runes like candy. It's just like, oh, okay, I guess it's not as. I was thinking earlier on in the game that it's like, oh, this is the one rune of this, so it's going to be important that I use this on the right person. But then it's just like, oh no, they're just. I got 8 of them now because I was fighting this same group of enemies over and over and over again. It's just like, oh, okay, I guess I just have plenty of these.
I want to talk about story and characters, and then I want to get into our final thoughts here with Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes. So spoiler alert, spoiler. You play as Noah, a young man who joins a loosey-goosey local guard. After the big bad invades your kingdom, you're forced to flee and gather allies as a resistance forms. This includes a reluctant child king, tree people, and anthropomorphic sharks. At one point, the story branches down multiple paths, and you play with different lead protagonists. John, which story beats and characters stood out to you in this experience?
I mean, the Shiarks She-Arcs.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, to me, they were like, that entire thing, you're doing the race, and, like, you can go back, they do this whole song and dance thing for you, where they're cheering, and you can watch it as many times as you want, so if you want to see it again, you can. It's so good. And they were just, like, these are sand sharks, too, mind you. Like, so they are sharks that, like, are afraid of water, and I just love them as a character. I enjoyed everything really too around Noah, and I think that's just because it's more of what I've played, right? They bring you in, they kind of, you get associated with him as your character, but I like the ragtag, resistance and him being the leader, but like kind of being made the leader, like by like the actual the person who's running the show saying, I'm going to make him the leader because if I was the leader, no one would follow us, right? Everyone loves an underdog. So I really like that piece. I think the Imperial guy is going to be interesting. I like that part with him initially. And I just don't think they've done enough with the third character from the woods at this point for me to kind of comment on.
Burns, why don't you go next?
Yeah, so I think, the She-Arc stuff is really cool. And just the name She-Arc is so, like, you see it on the page and you just don't think of it the way that it actually is until you get there and you're around them. It's like, oh, okay, I see what they did there. And it, some of them are more piratey, so the She-Arcs, and I don't know. I think that whole part is super clever. But I think some of my favorite pieces of the game actually revolve around kind of something really sort of minor and something that actually doesn't change, like, what happens in the story. But it's really cool at certain points in the game where Noah has a couple of different options of what to say, and how that, like, doesn't affect the overarching story, but at least the next bits of dialogue, it will affect that quite a bit. So, for instance, one earlier where he gets to say I can't remember what it was, but it's a callback to the original Suikoden and just the wonkiest name that was made up in that game that you were pretending to be. And if you say that, then it's like Kogan and his two other henchmen, just like Kogan especially calls you that all the time. And like he originally just calls you like General Schwarzenfelder or whatever the heck it was. I can't remember what it was. And I just, that was like so funny to me. And just like the fact that kept up the next few times he talked about you until he realized your name was Noah. It's just like, I thought that was really cool. And I think then later on in the game, so when Periel basically says, all right, well, the jig is up, you're actually the commander. And Noah has a chance to say something. And it's like, oh, well, I'm only doing this for Periel, to support Periel. Or he can say, no, we're going to do that, and like take command. And I really like the fact that if you choose like the take command option, it's just like, the people that have been around you for a while is like, whoa, you're really like leaning into this a little bit, And I don't know, I think that those little bits go such a long way in helping to build the relationships between these characters, which I think is really well done in this. And even though, those decisions don't change like anything with the throughput of the story, but it feels impactful in the moment, which is, making sure that they do those dialogue decisions right. And so far I've really enjoyed the ability to sort of how those make Noah be the character that you want him to be, I guess.
Yeah, Burns, that's a great point, and the dialogue is fantastic in this game. What I thought stood out about the story was really the pacing, because you run through all these different story beats, you go into different things, you meet Noah, you play as Noah for most of the game, and you meet Sane early on, and then eventually the story splits between Noah and Sane, you choose which path you're going to go, and then you complete that, and then you can go back to the other side and finish it with the other character. Then they come back together, and then Marissa comes in, and you're playing as the third character, and she's aligned with Noah, and I just thought they did a masterful job of like rolling through the different story beats. I thought sometimes I got bogged down in the dungeons and not being able to fast travel out of them, and that drove me crazy. And I thought especially early on, there was a lot of time between save points, which was exceptionally challenging. But for the most part, where I thought this game shined was just the pacing and how they rolled out the different story beats. Mike, your perspective, having finished this game?
Oh, I agree. They did an amazing job when you consider how many characters there are. Obviously, the big emphasis is the top three. The trio of heroes are the core of everything. But that first group with Leanne and Gar and Periel was really well drawn. And then Sane's little grouping of people support him. And is it Marissa? I think that's her name.
Yep,
from the
Marissa,
forest.
yep.
Each of their support groups is nicely drawn out, and you can kind of feel the way they treat each other, the way they feel about each other, and it's a ton of depth. And the side characters have personality. Even though they're not given a lot to do necessarily, they're well designed, they're visually appealing, and they're given enough, a lot of them, that you remember who they are, which is amazing when you have a cast of 120 characters. Something like 65 of them you could put into your party. I mean, like the necromancer lady, Milana, I think her name is, and then Marcus, the
Oh, you can recruit Marcus?
Marcus is great, and the way those two interact and play off each other is absolutely brilliant.
Oh, that is
and the
fun.
Shiark, as already mentioned, that Shiark song lives in my heart forever. I mean, it's just so good. I just love the little, charm they put into their character designs and implementation that just lets you care about characters who barely are on screen. Yet you still remember them and you're still happy to see them because of the little details they, throw into the characters. It's the best thing about, well, you probably haven't seen him, but there's also a Mexican wrestler. If you haven't seen him, he's also great.
Awesome. I want to go
One
around
of
the
the last
horn.
characters I recruited is El Alicanto, the Mexican wrestler.
I want to go around the horn and talk about our favorite characters. I'll go first to give you guys just a moment to think about it. But two of the characters that I really enjoyed, even though they didn't, well, one had a bigger role, but I really enjoyed Leanne and just her shtick throughout it, how she adopts Noah as a little brother and keeps saying that she's the boss, and just the big sister vibe. I thought that was incredibly charming. And I like their hero combo together. I really liked Leanne, and Lady Periel was my favorite character. That wasn't my avatar. Maybe it's because she's blonde, but I love how she kept pointing out the absurdity of these politicians squabbling when the Dukes is bringing his army, and it's of course we have to do this song and dance again because we're in another royal court. And I thought that she was a very strong and independent woman, and I just really enjoyed those two characters. Bernsey, your favorite ancillary characters?
So I think my favorite. I got a little bit of feedback. Hopefully that's better now. I think my favorite character, and it might be influenced a little bit from Rising, but is Guru. Guru. So in the first game, in Rising, they play around with it a lot too, where he's got this gruff exterior, but as you chip away at it and chip away at it and chip away at it, you get to sort of see behind it, and that he's just this huge softy, right? And I think with Alabi, you really get to see that at times. And then it's just oh, wait, you don't say anything about what you just saw to anyone kind of thing. And so I really, really just like Guru a lot. So I think he's probably my favorite side character.
And John?
So, I mean, Shiarks aside, because they're awesome. I really like Bababa. Right?
Never found Bababa.
Really like that. So Bababa is the fortune teller.
Oh yeah, I found Bababa.
So, right, and just the way that you go and you find her, I loved her whole shtick of no, I don't predict the future. I just see your past, right? And every time so I really liked her just from that initial get go. She was fun, and then I think I really, really also like Prunell, right? I agree. She is just a breath of fresh air behind the entire cast of characters, right? So I like how she's manipulating things from behind the scenes, putting Noah in that spot, right? Having to deal with the non-decisive guy in the samurai type city, right? So I liked her as really almost like the driving force of the story, right? Even though she wasn't one of the main 3 characters on the cover of the game.
Yeah, well said. Mike, your favorite characters?
Well, besides the Melina and Marcus pairing I already mentioned, I want to give a shout out to Ymir and his passive-aggressive attitude the entire time. Where Noah comes in, is made the commander by Periel, and he's just constantly just a little bit snippy, and everything he says at all times, basically through the entire game. He just never quite lets you forget that, to him, you're just the new guy who doesn't mean a whole lot. And I really kind of admire him for that, for being consistent the whole way through.
For refusing to grow and evolve, Ymir.
Damn right.
All right, final thoughts on Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes. John, how well did this game hit for you? And did your thoughts on this game change from our part 1 discussion last month to this wrap-up discussion?
I'm conflicted on this game, right? There are some things
everything you said was positive. Literally everything you said was positive.
No, it's not. Like, so, all right, I love the characters. I love the story, right? What I don't love about this game is actually how much it's like the older game, the games of old. Like, the quality of life stuff is horrible, right? Like, if you would take this story and these characters and the awesome like building system and you just tweak it a little bit to actually not have it be so old school, I think they were trying to like be like, we're gonna make this be like a PS1 RPG. We're gonna make 100%. This be old school like that, right? And I like nostalgia, right? But I also like give me the option to maybe turn some of that on or off, or like there's a reason why some of those things don't exist today. Right? Hey, why can't I like quick save this game at any point? Why can't I like fast travel out of this dungeon? Why, if A Link to the Past can have like, this is Stairway A, and when you go up a level, you see you came from Stairway A in a Super Nintendo game, why can't I have that in this game here? So I feel like the things that some of the things they brought back are the items that we've gotten rid of because they are a waste of time today. Those are bad designs that were there back then because we needed to pad this game out. And even like a lot of the side content with like Bagoma and things of that nature, I don't like that. I like content being hidden, but I don't like a lot of content being like gated behind this game I'm never going to play. Right? So that's, again, par for the course for this type of game, but that's why I'm conflicted. Like, I will probably continue playing and I will finish this because I want to see how the story unfolds, right? And I like these characters and this world is great. I feel like this is like an 80-hour game if you want to collect everybody, that they really could have like narrowed down to a 30-hour game and you still could have had 100 characters, right? You still could have had all these great interactions and you could have just sped up some of the battle stuff and the other things that were a little bit weaker, right? Because hey, we don't care about this rune lens system that you really don't use. Get rid of it. So then I don't have to worry about, right? So still play it, right? Definitely if you have Game Pass, pick it up, play it. If you like RPGs, it's a great role-playing game, right? Don't let my negativity here, just be ready for that. And I think if you're ready for the old school stuff, then it won't be so jarring and you'll still have a good time.
John, I think it's really funny how we align sometimes, because in our recent Unfiltered episode, like I was dumping all over the most recent Miles Morales movie, and you were defending it, and then I'm like, yeah, I'd give it like a 7.75, and you're like, yeah, that's about right. On this game, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I think this game is a gem, and I loved it. It's my favorite game I've played since Lies of P, and one of my favorite games that I played in the last few years. And I'm really excited to dive into it more. And most of the things that we've talked about makes me even more excited. It's like, oh, now I understand the loop. Every story beat, I gotta fast travel to every town. Like, once I unlocked fast travel, like, moments after we had that discussion last month, I got fast travel, like, oh, cool, go to every town, talk to everyone, recruit everyone I can. Great. And then progress the story, get to this new town, talk to everyone. Now that I know that I have to go back, it's like, oh, that's going to open up a lot of things for me. And it just makes me more excited to dive back into Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes, which I think is a modern JRPG classic.
Also, walk around your base some, because sometimes you'll meet new characters just by walking around different parts of your base. So that's another thing that you need to do from time to time also. So I don't know. I really enjoyed this game. I think it's phenomenal. As far as like who it's recommended for, I see it as being like a flowchart. Do you have any affinity for Suikoden? If you do, you probably either already have this game on your backlog, but if not, you need to play this game. Like, if you like those older games at all, like, this is the new that. So until those remasters come out or remakes come out from Konami in the next year, this is the game that you should play. If you have an affinity for older RPGs, I would definitely recommend it. Or if you have an affinity for turn-based RPGs, I would recommend it. If you haven't done a lot with RPGs, I think it's a little bit more difficult of a decision, right? So the biggest thing I'm going to say is you can definitely tell that this is their first game. Rabbit and Bear Studios haven't made a game as a group. This was a labor of love. It definitely seems like they don't have a ton of resources for their team. Part of that sort of pairs into the Kickstarter and how, everybody that was in the Kickstarter is supposed to be getting codes for the DLC. And that just hasn't happened yet, even though the DLC's been out since launch. So sometime that'll come up. But I think like there's been lots of bugs in a lot of the different versions. There's some graphical things that just aren't right. Like, I think the game looks great in a lot of places, but there's times where you run through certain areas and you just see this line moving along the floor as to where the blurriness of the camera, like, comes into the crispness of the camera, and it's just, like, super apparent. You just see this, like, alias line just moving along, and it's like, some of that stuff I really would wish that they would have been able to clean up. I feel like in a second game, they would really be able to polish a lot of those things. But yeah, that's some of the stuff that I sort of ran into, and just a couple of other like weird graphical quirks that'll happen at times.
Well, Burns, let me stop you for 1 second. Let me stop you for one second. John, did you run into any of that playing on Xbox? Because I did not, that I recall, on Series X.
I know exactly what you're talking about, right? There is a couple of like little glitchy areas. Other than like a few moments, though, it was pretty solid performance, except for the bug I mentioned last time where like if you go into your, quick resume, it kills the sound. So you have to actually save, close out, and then come back if you want to have any sound. That was frustrating. But other than that, I felt like the game was gorgeous, right? It looked great, played great. Right, so at least on a Series X, and I did some cloud play too. That worked as well, extremely well.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Burns. I just thought maybe it was a PlayStation Xbox difference.
Maybe it is. It could be. It feels like though it's like this is the shader that does the different thing depending on where the camera's at, and it's just in certain areas. Especially, there's a couple of floors in the headquarters where you really notice it. And it's just like, oh, okay, I see this line moving across the room as I move across it, kind of. It's not everywhere that happens. There's also just, and I had this issue with Octopath Traveler, so I think it's just the HD 2D thing. It's just like, things just randomly sparkle for no friggin' reason. Like, I know you're trying to go with a look here, but, everything doesn't need to have little sparkle tips. So I don't know. Just a couple of little things here and there. And just some other stuff that it's just like, I feel like with a second game, it would be really interesting to see how well they could iterate off of this. I still do wonder whether... I wonder what's going to happen since like one of the main driving forces, the main creative force of it, passed away right before the game came out. And so without Murayama, I don't know if there's an Eiyuden Chronicle 2 or whatever, if it's not a sequel of this, if it's something different but the same vein. I'm just not sure what happens with that. I'm curious. The fact that there haven't been a lot of Kickstarter updates and there hasn't been a lot of communication outside of the Discord from the developers, I'm curious what the longevity of the studio is. I really hope that they could do more, because I feel like a second game building off of what they learned from this could be really great. I still highly recommend it. I've still had a ton of fun with it. It's checking all the boxes that I had when I played through Suikoden and half of Suikoden 2. So I don't know. I think it's a phenomenal game. I think it's great. I think people should play it.
And Mike, your final thoughts on Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes?
I agree. I think it's incredibly charming, and I had some doubts early. I was frustrated by the inventory system and had a few, technical glitches, but once you get past that, get into the game, it's such a love letter to a specific era, not just Suikoden, obviously, but that PS1, second tier RPG era of, Suikoden and Grandia and Tales and Breath of Fire. And if you played and loved any of those games from back in the day, this game gets you, and this game will be for you. And if you're interested in that period, maybe this is a way to see what that was like, because it's trying so hard to be that game from, PS1 1996.
Yeah, so crappy old things can be fun. John?
I do want to say, while I was just kind of negative, I echo everyone here. Play it, right? Unless you just don't like role-playing games, don't. But seriously, play this game, right? I think I complain about it because I want it to be a little bit more, because I like the things I like about it so much. I'm like, if you would have just had this little extra piece right here, drop this, you're going from an 8 to a 10, right? So do please play this game.
Yeah, and give them lots of money so that the next game can happen. That wraps up our discussion on Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes Part 2. We'll be back next month to discuss Neon White, developed by Angel Matrix, produced by Annapurna Interactive. And just a quick side note, Burns is the best. Just the best. Neon White is a lightning-fast, first-person action platformer set beyond the pearly gates of heaven. The features: you play as Neon White, an assassin plucked from hell to compete with other demon slayers for a shot at redemption. You collect soul cards to attack your foes or discard them to use unique movement abilities. You compete for the best times by cleverly combining cards to discover massive shortcuts and uncover heaven's mysteries by getting to know the other assassins. Did you know them in a past life? John, you selected this thing for our next Game Club discussion. Why did you settle on, and how did you settle on, Neon White?
I really wanted something that was a completely, different game that we were playing, and I was looking for something that was a little bit quicker, right? You could sit down, you could play. I was hoping to find something that had more of a score chase mechanic, like a Geometry Wars from back in the 360 days. This has this a little bit with the time chase. So I love a good mashup. It's got a card system. It's got a little bit of Mirror's Edge tied into it. You get to shoot some stuff, and it's got a really, really weird story tied to it. So I'm like, all right, there's a lot of interesting things being thrown into the pot here, and everybody's been raving and talking about it. So I'm like, all right, let's play the new hot thing that is completely different from anything we've played in the last few months.
Burns, you excited for this thing?
Yeah, I know when this first came out 2 summers ago, people were super into it, and people got hardcore into leaderboard chasing and trying to get the fastest time that you can. So I don't know. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll tap into the very little bit of speed running that I did, and seeing how addicting that can be. I'm looking forward to getting hooked by that with Neon White.
Burns, given how you like to consume games, I have a hard time seeing you as a speedrunner, my friend.
I mean, I had the fastest speedrunning time of Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light on the Switch. It wasn't the fastest time, because with emulators you could get through the slow loading times of the Switch. But I had the fastest time. I probably still do, because I don't think people speedrun it on Switch. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that and learn that, because it was nice and short and concise. But these levels, I mean, I think that some of them you can beat in 12 seconds by building these weird combos. So looking forward to getting into that and seeing how it works.
Mike, as the voice of our Patreon community, are you excited to play this game with us? You're going to be back on this segment next month?
I don't know, a speed-based card battling score chase. It's everything in gaming that I don't do in one sentence that you said, so it might be a stretch.
So I'll take that as a definite yes. All right, Mike's in. Get your brother to come.
Well, he'll be all over it.
I hope that our listeners will jump in and play with us. Please support Outside is Overrated at patreon.com/OiO. And until next month, stay inside, kids.